a correct listening space too, because you
in a correct yes,
I think you could get reps. Like it's like going to the gym. Like you could be going to the gym, like I went to the gym every day, but like you come back and you're not putting on muscle and you're hurting yourself technically, like it's very easy to go to the gym, have bad form and like tear muscles and like actually hurt your body, get a hernia, like those are real things that happen that could also happen in your studio. Like you could think you're making dope records, but you're just getting used to making really loud, muddy records or something. So it's got to be done in a sort of controlled, trustworthy space, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in my room is pretty well treated, but when I bought the monitors I'm working on now, that I just the trust went up like I don't know, tenfold. Yeah. Like I'm not even on such crazy expensive monitors. I'm like focal shaped twins.
Yeah.
But they translate so well. I just trust every EQ move at this point, which I didn't with my previous speakers. And now it's like, okay, cool. And then I'll do what you do, like with the AirPods, just kind of, when I'm making coffee or something in the other room,
I mean, sometimes you need that creative change too, I mean, I've been toying with the idea of changing up the monitors too, just because, what works one day might not work the next. And sometimes you need a little bit of a new creative lens to view it through for you to, at that point, it's maybe a little bit less about confidence and a little bit more about you're maybe focusing on something different in your mixes than you were previously, maybe before you were really focused on just getting flat, like mixes that were balanced and translated. And now it's like, now that you got that down, like that skill set's down, like now you're like really interested in like, how can I get them to like be wide, or like, how can I get them to be loud, or how can I get them to like be like, feel really deep? Or how can I make my drums hit harder? Like I think there's always certain things that like, at least in my mind, the way that I work, I'm always in tune to, so whether that's like, oh, I'm really on a vocal kick recently, and certain monitors, once you get to a certain price point with monitors, they're all just fine. Like they're all doing the same thing. They're all trustworthy. Like they're all using, they're different designs and they sound different, but it's just preference at that point, and stylistically can maybe help you see something different. So
why replace your monitors? Why not just get another pair?
Well, because the ones that I would want would be very expensive, and because again, like at some point they're all fine. Like they're all full range monitors that are going to give you the frequency spectrum. Like why do I need two monitors that do that just slightly different? I'm also just not a big reference guy anymore for that reason as well. Like if you trust something, why do you need two of them?
It's different with like the mixed cubes, but like
totally. Yeah. I mean,
but like
they serve
with the full range monitors.
Exactly. They serve a little bit of a different purpose, I think. You're not really, that's more of like a reference thing than it is actually, mixing, let's say. But at the end of the day, it's like something to inspire you too, like if you're tired of sitting in this room, like maybe change your room up, and then you'll want to mix in the room and you won't be distracted as much, and you won't want to pick up your phone every 3 seconds to like check your Facebook or whatever, because you're actually really in your room and you really enjoy listening to your brand new PMCs or whatever they are. So
stay inspired, people.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a slippery slope too, because then you have the people who are like, I'm buying something new every day, I got to stay inspired. Like that's kind of a trap you could fall into too, thinking, in order to be inspired, you need to buy something new constantly. So you kind of have to be a little bit aware of like, am I just trying to warrant just spending money and buying gear, or like, am I actually just kind of like burnt out and ready for something new that, will get me out of maybe your rut.
It is a slippery slope.
Yeah.
Yeah, because it really can inspire. Buying new things can really inspire new creativity. Like I buy new bass, like that's a massive thing for me, right? Like that's going to change the game. And my buddy was showing me his like I don't even know what it's called, but it's like a drum machine. It's like one of those $300 drum machines that it's all tactile and everything. It's like, oh cool, I do everything on MIDI in the computer, but this is like it's tactile and it's inspiring, and like all of a sudden you're like messing with filters and you're making these really cool sounds. It's just like that's a different experience than trying to program something on your computer. And
absolutely,
it's so much more instant and visceral. And like, oh, I get that. spending $300 on this kind of like drum machine could really inspire a lot of creativity. And it's like, so yeah, spending money does help, but you don't want it to be a crutch, I guess, so to speak.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't know if there's any, I wish there was a better answer or way of understanding like at what point that is, but I think part of it's like self-control.
Budget,
some people maybe don't do that as much, but yeah, I mean, I'm the type who will talk myself out of something all the time. Just because like I don't need it, I might want it, but like I can still like I have fine gear already. Like I don't need new speakers. I don't need a new interface.
Right, but with new things, you might get somewhere that you didn't even know you could get to. We don't need necessarily anything more than we already have, right? An interface, a computer, speakers. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
But something else can help. Yeah, I don't know. Are you fully in the box these days? What does your workflow look like?
I am. I mean, I have outboard gear, and I've accumulated some stuff over the years, and I use it to like record on the front end, occasionally when I do that, which isn't often, but I'll produce every once in a while, and I like having kind of knobs to twist and turn, and that inspires me on that sense. But as far as mixing, yeah, it's all in the box for me. Again, just trying to move quick. I also feel like my mixing style is much more less bold, big picture, sort of like I don't do the top down sort of thing. Like I'm not pushing hard into gear. I'm much more of like a chisel and like fine tooth comb sort of person than I am like pushing in. And like I feel like outboard gear, you can't really be so finite and like minuscule with. You kind of have to push it and pull it and let it do its thing. That's just not the way I mix, really.
Right.
It works for some people who love to just like push into it, and like it's the old school way. Like if you ever watch those CLA videos, which is why I hate mix tips from CLA. It's like what people don't realize is like, look at his mix bus. He's taking 10 dB off. Like he's pushing it so hard into stuff that like that's why he's doing 10 dB at 10K and 10 dB at 100
right,
hertz.
because it's getting attenuated by the compressors.
Exactly. Like you're pushing and pulling so hard.
Yeah.
And that's just not the way that I mix normally. So I'm much more of a like FabFilter Pro Q guy who's like boosting a dB here, cutting a dB there, and like working more in that fashion. And that just, you have to be in the box to do that sort of thing. So that's why I've kind of gone all in the box. And it also just takes the questioning out of it. There's always differences in outboard gear. One day I would turn something on and like for some reason the left channel would be like a half dB less, and now I'm like, instead of working, now I'm like trying to figure out what happened on my patch bay, or like if the gear's weird today or something. Like, and I just there's nothing more frustrating to me than that, like waking up every day and being like, I gotta crawl behind my rack today because something some reason it's doing this. So yeah, fully in the box.
The callability all the way.
Yeah, doesn't make for good Instagram pictures, but
who cares? Makes for good mixes.
Yeah,
I mean, it seems like more and more people are just going all in on the box these days. Like there's definitely still something to outboard gear, but it just doesn't seem like anybody who's, I don't know, the younger breed of mixers, I guess like the millennial breed, the millennial mixers all seem to be moving into the box, like pretty much fully.
I mean, even producers. I mean, the whole landscape of making music nowadays is wildly different than it was even 4 years ago. It's just, it's pretty, even 2 years ago, it's crazy what you can do. And even sonically, like, yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I was starting to try and say earlier, I think, is even sonically, the idea of something that sonically sounds good is such a moving target nowadays that it's hard to even, for me at least, get excited about that. Like if you listen to New Music Friday, like some of that stuff just sounds awful, awful to my ears. But it's top 40. It's the Chainsmokers. Like, who's questioning that? Like that's just what it sounds like nowadays. So the idea of chasing good or bad is really just kind of an endless goal that you're never going to get to. I think there's, certain things that are maybe more correct than others, but like that to me has just become something that I can't chase anymore because I'll go crazy,
Yeah. The Steely Dan era is over of, those archetypical records that just sounded so good. Because it's all over the place and there's so much saturation these days, and some records are so loud and some are so dynamic. And
Yeah.
It's just it's all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, that's the hard part. Yeah. I mean, and your idea of what Steely Dan sounds like might be good, and I might listen to it and go like, this sounds awful. Like it's
right.
It's hard to chase a quality thing, which is why, I mentioned when I get a mix and I hear the rough, like that's sort of my Bible. That's my,
I was predicting Bible when you said that. I was like, oh yeah,
like that's because that's all I have. Like that's the benchmark for what I have to make, quote unquote, better. Which I don't even like the term better because it's better. I have to make it better, but it's just the idea of like, how can I make whatever this vibe, whatever this rough is doing, as good or as bad as it may be, like what story is it telling, and how can I make that translate in a way that is going to be received to the listener in a way that isn't going to make them want to skip it or whatever that may be. So, that's why I don't, listen to Music Friday and like judge the mixes as much as I just judge the song and the emotion of it.
So when you're mixing a song, you're referencing the rough, but you're not necessarily referencing another song that it might, sit in a similar ballpark to. You're just only with the song and making it better.
Pretty much. I mean, occasionally, like the artist or producer will say like, hey, we were going for this style thing. We were going for like a Katy Perry Teenage Dream vibe thing. And then in that case, I'll be like, okay, let's hear it. And I'll listen to Katy Perry Teenage Dream. And the reason I mean, I'll appease them for that. But the reason I don't maybe put too much value in it is because like what they were perceiving about that record might be wildly different than what it actually was. Like so many times people are like, oh, I was going for this type of thing. And then you hear their song and their song's cool and great, but it's not nearly like sonically what they thought they were doing. They were perceiving, oh, well, like the singer's voice kind of sounds like Katy Perry, or the song's about teenagers, and now they're telling me like, hey, we want a Teenage Dream type thing. And I'm like, okay, that, well, they have like the subs feels like this and the kick's really big. But really the reason they're telling me that is totally different. Like they don't, like if I were to turn the kick up and change their rough so much that it actually sounded like Teenage Dream, it would just be, I would miss the point,
Right.
So I always listen to it a little bit, but at the end of the day, yeah, it's just about the rough.
Take it with a grain of salt.
Pretty much. I like to listen to get inside their head to some extent, like there's value in that, I think. But yeah, it's apples and oranges, like all you can do is work with what you have in front of you. And for me, that's the rough mix and what the files are doing. So that's usually my approach.
Yeah. Well, you kind of mentioned that you're very like, combing the individual tracks with a fine comb as opposed to kind of starting with the stereo bus and working your way down. Well, what are your thoughts on like stereo bus compression, stereo bus processing? Are you kind of like trying to get every element to be individually locked and not glue it, at the top, or like what's your thought process there?
Yeah, pretty much exactly that. I'm not doing a ton of like mix bus stuff. I'll do maybe like some over big picture like tone shaping, like maybe an EQ that's just doing like 1 dB here and there. And then from there, it's just about sort of loudness, to be totally honest. Like it's just about sort of saturating it in a way, or just getting it up to like a sort of aggressive forward level out of the mix bus. But I'm not doing any compression on the mix bus. I'm not really doing any EQ that does maybe a little bit here and there. Not a big fan of like mid-side or anything. Like nothing destructive, really. Just sort of additive stuff. So like I'll do some saturation. I mean, destructive is I am limiting the mix bus, obviously, just to get it to some level. But other than that, it's usually just like some color that, truthfully, if you were to take away, wouldn't make or break the record. Yeah, that's my approach to mix bus. I used to do way more, but it just, I don't know, it just got to the point where, again, a lot of times mixes are so dialed that it doesn't even need it, or it feels smaller sometimes if you start slamming it with different compressors and whatnot. Yeah, I've honestly, I mean, I compress a fair amount, but not as much as maybe some people would think a mixer would compress. I don't know, but.
Well, saturation seems to do a lot of the the density thing that people kind of talk about, right? Of like making a sound bigger with